Let's suppose that you're a provincial premier, and I told you there's a cure for COVID, and it's not a vaccine. What would you do? Ignore it? Well, I have to tell you, it does exist, and it has existed for over a year, and I heard about it purely by accident. I was listening to what are called podcasts. These are on my iPhone, and I was interested to see what was going on in the rest of the world. So I searched podcasts and COVID, and I found a fellow from Singapore. And Singapore had a particularly low infection rate at that point. I don't know what it's like now, but what he had found was very simply that congregate living organizations known as dormitories, where guest laborers, which is another nice word for cheap laborers brought in from India, lived together in a sort of a communal thing, and they had an enormous infection rate. The rest of Singapore, which is very high density, but very better, I suppose, better medicine, more careful. I don't know exactly why, but the infection rate was apparently low. Now, they had done in comparisons to other people who had previous versions of SARS to see whether or not their antibodies still existed from the 2001 or 2000 infection, and they did. So I think the good news there is probably that we will have some sort of antibodies that will develop in human beings. But seriously, what happened to create a cure that we never took advantage of? Well, there's a guy, and his name is Sanjay Sidhu, I think. Sidhu is for sure. He runs Sidhu Labs at the University of Toronto in Canada. And what did he do? Well, what he likes to do is his lab likes to work with proteins. Okay, proteins. This is part of the building blocks of life. And he developed a protein because he examined COVID cells over a period of time, about 20 years, to understand their exact structure. And he had it down to the shape and size of the molecule that was required to stop COVID. Full stop. Mm-hmm. Now, show you understand how COVID works, I'm going to try and illustrate it to you with something pointed. Okay, I have here a Sharpie, the kind that Donald Trump used to use. So, when a virus comes along, it has, in this particular instance, in the case of COVID, it has a shape to the end of it, just like the end of this Sharpie has a specific shape. And what it will do in our instance right now, is that it will plug itself into some part of the human body that fits it. And then instead of having ink, it has RNA in it. And the RNA will squirt out through this specific spiny bit and into a cell. Once the cell receives the RNA, then things start to happen. And that's where the infection comes from. So what did Sidhu Labs do? Well, they defined the shape of that particular piece of the virus down to a molecular level. Okay, so they took each atom and figured out the shape. And then while they were at it, they said, okay, so what's the opposite of that shape, and figured out that. And this is something, again, they've been doing for like 20 years, so it's not new, right? And then they said, okay, so if this particular pointy thing that's attached to the big ball is how the RNA gets out and how we get infected, what we need to do is we need to put a cap on the end of the spine, or in this case, my pen. Now, once that's there, it doesn't fit into anything in the body. And that was what Sidhu Labs designed. A pen cap, if you like. So the RNA couldn't get out. I heard about this, and I'm Joe Average, right? And I tripped over it at a guy called the Dean Blundell Show on it. And let's see if I can just look up the time of the thing. May 25th, 2020 is when I heard about this. I hadn't heard about it since. There isn't a politician out there who's speaking of it. Now, it's quite possible that I am the only person who heard the show. I doubt it, but I mean, who knows? I'm pretty sure not, though, because I went looking again, and I did find that this particular approach had been used twice through podcasts. And Sidhu himself was the interviewee, and he said, yes, I would like to tell you about my thing. And he said, now, one of the things that I have to say is that we still need vaccines. And so the interviewer said, well, why do we need vaccines? And he's like, well, He said, just because I can invent a chemical that will block COVID does not stop your body, or does not teach your body anything. It only kills off the ability of the virus to do anything. In order for your body to fight it off, we still need a vaccine. And so there have been two types of vaccines that have been invented. One is a traditional one where it actually has, takes a piece of the thing and snaps off the bottom half with all the rest of it, lets this float around inside you, and your body sees it and says, that's a foreign ping. What shape is that? And it invents its own version of the pen cap. That's what you call an antibody. So your body learns to fight it off by normal, natural means. So what has happened? Well, a lot of people have died completely unnecessarily, I think, because nobody has ever done what the Sidhu Labs have done before, and they're terrified of letting us try it. So we'd rather let people die. I think that's madness. Total and absolute madness. If you're a politician and you get this, and you've never heard of Sidhu Labs, give them a listen. Just Google Sidhu Labs, University of Toronto. It's not hard to find. My name's Pat Stewart, here for better information to everybody, and here to tell you, stop voting Conservative because, well, I just don't.